It's Monday, October 27th, and the strongest storm in Jamaica's history is only 24 hours away from landfall. We're currently expecting a landfall Tuesday morning, and this is what it currently looks like. Still, probably one of the most organized storms that I've ever seen. Definitely one of the most organized storms that we've seen this season. It is rapidly dropping in pressure currently, still intensifying at a really quick rate, and this is just a really amazing storm structure. We have this really defined eye at the middle, and this storm just could not look more organized as it intensifies and preps to make a landfall in central Jamaica. And just to give a perspective of how quickly Melissa is truly intensifying, this is some recon data from one of our Hurricane Hunter planes, and it just recently made a pass measuring 937 millibars of a low central pressure in Melissa's eye. Now, a couple of things to note are that every single time this plane passes, that the pressure is decreasing almost by 5 to 10 millibars, anywhere in the range. So Melissa actually stalled an intensification a little bit yesterday, but has now definitely ramped up and is looking like it's going to approach possibly the strongest it will get. And even though Melissa is still somewhat far off of the coast of Jamaica, a lot of the impacts have already begun. A lot of this flow onshore is already causing some storm surge in areas like Kingston and just mostly southern Jamaica, but it's going to be more on the eastern side of Portland Point. That is what this little peninsula kind of jutting out on the southern side of Jamaica is called. Another thing, though, is that pretty much the entire island has been enveloped by tropical storm force winds. And then also the rainfall. The rainfall is going to be a main thing or main factor that has been discussed. It has started and it is likely going to total anywhere upward of potentially even 40 inches. Anywhere within a range of 40 to 60 inches is going to be possible when it is all said and done. So all the impacts have started, even though Melissa is still somewhat far off the southern coast of Jamaica. Now, the track of Melissa has wobbled a little bit more to the west than we were looking at yesterday. Now, this does mean a couple of things, good and bad. There is really nothing good with Melissa right now. It truly is a worst case scenario for Jamaica. It's also going to be the strongest hurricane on record to hit the island. Now, a couple of things that differentiate Melissa from storms in the past. A lot of these storms in the past have kind of gone from east to west across the island. This is going to be literally the first storm on record that's going from a south to north track. So the southern side of Jamaica is going to be hit like it has never been before, and is going to truly feel quite a bit of surge and just a much larger impact than they've ever felt before. And then on a more literal note, on that more larger impact, this is going to be the strongest storm by far to ever make a landfall on the island. Other category 4s have brushed somewhat to the south as they move east to west in parts of the Gulf, but the only storm to actually hit it direct on at its strongest was a category 3 hurricane. This looks like it's going to be a category 5. A lot of our models are bringing it down to anywhere within the 920 millibar range. That is undoubtedly going to be a category 5, specifically the HAFSA model, which I think has shown a really good representation so far of Melissa, is showing that it could get down to 905 millibars and even potentially have sustained winds of upwards of 170 miles an hour. Now, will this happen? Don't really know for sure, but it is looking like a category 5 hurricane is going to be impacting Jamaica. And once you get over that category 5 threshold, it means that destruction is going to be very intense, and it doesn't really matter at that point of how much stronger a storm is by 5 miles an hour or weaker by 5 miles an hour. But that is currently what we're looking at. Now, for a lot of the impacts, like I already said, potentially 170 mile an hour sustained winds gusting in excess of 200 miles an hour at landfall. I also think a landfall near Treasure Beach looks like it's going to be kind of the most probable thing right now. That's what a lot of our models are clinging on to. Now, that does mean a couple more things for impacts, because we have this little peninsula jutting out from the southern portion of Jamaica. That means that a lot of our largest surge, which the National Hurricane Center has said could be anywhere between 9 to 15 feet. I think it could even be in excess of 15 feet if this storm were to come onshore as a extremely, extremely powerful Category 5 hurricane. I think it's going to mostly be between the landfall point near Treasure Beach and then this peninsula right here. Of course, that's going to be where that peak surge is going to be. Also, now in more eastern portions of Jamaica, like near Kingston, I think there will still be surge. Of course, there's surge already going on now, but it is somewhat minimal. I don't really think we'll see anything over 5 feet in this eastern portion. I think it's going to be a lot less than over in this main area. Same with the winds. Of course, the winds within the eye wall are going to be very confined to a pretty small area exactly around the eye. So also with that, I think pretty much the entire island has a chance of experiencing some sort of strong tropical storm winds, some hurricane gust even, but I think only those strongest winds are going to be felt near that landfall point, which looks like Treasure Beach is currently where it's at. And then rainfall, because Melissa has tracked a little bit more west than we were originally thinking, this does mean a couple of more unfortunate things. This means that more of the island is going to be experiencing some of those peak rainfall totals in excess of 30, 40, then even totaling anywhere between 40 to 60 inches of rain, because Jamaica has a somewhat mountainous terrain. That also means a lot of landslides are going to be in play. But yeah, this is just kind of what we're looking at right now, 24 hours out from landfall, and it is still not looking good. It even looks maybe a little bit worse than it did yesterday, which is kind of hard to say because this storm has kind of been a worst case scenario. And this is the official 4-day rainfall forecast from the National Hurricane Center. You've probably been seeing this a lot if you've been keeping up with Melissa on other channels. And we can actually see, because the track of Melissa has shifted a little bit more to the west, we can see that more of the island is going to be enveloped by a larger area where we're expecting upwards of 30 inches of rainfall. That possible 40 inches of tag has still remained over a far southern and eastern area of Jamaica. That's where that mountainous terrain is going to be, which will also kind of increase that potential for rain also. And then also we're getting some higher probabilities listed in parts of southeastern Cuba as the track for Melissa becomes more sure. It looks like we could get anywhere between 20 to 30 inches there as well, maybe even upwards of that. And here's another official graphic from the National Hurricane Center. This is going to be the cone of uncertainty. A couple of things we can see here. Of course, pretty much the entirety of Jamaica has been engulfed by tropical storm winds. We already mentioned that, and the track is becoming more and more sure. They are also predicting a pretty much direct hit on Treasure Beach at this point, and it looks like even a new thing which has popped up is that it looks like Melissa's subsequent landfall in southeastern Cuba will still be as a pretty powerful major hurricane. Then also it looks like Bermuda could also have a higher potential of seeing some of the impacts from Melissa as well as we go into the future, maybe around in between Thursday and Friday this week. Also, the Bahamas, it looks like more southern and eastern portions of the Bahamas are going to be under the gun for this, but also it just looks like the track is becoming more and more sure for the regions which we thought it was going to go at. So that's somewhat good news because these regions have had more time to prepare, but in a way it's also not, because these regions are going to be impacted somewhat heavily by a very powerful storm. A little update on the speed of Melissa. This has been a big story. Yesterday, it was quite literally moving at a walking pace, 2 miles an hour. It has sped up a little bit to 5 miles an hour as it wobbles a little bit to the west, but it looks like it's going to pretty much stall and almost be moving at close to 0 miles an hour as it makes that turn to the north. That looks like that's going to be when a majority of the rainfall on Jamaica is dumped. Now, in yesterday's forecast, something we actually spent a decent amount of time talking about was the shear and how the shear was actually going to limit the strengthening of Melissa. And it looked like it did momentarily around midday yesterday to even the morning hours, as we didn't really see a super big jump when it was sitting at 950 millibars in strength. But now Melissa has also been moving into an environment of a little bit more favorable shear for development. So that was really the only thing holding Melissa back. And now that the shear is also favorable, I truly think this storm has a chance to even move up to a even stronger storm than we thought, maybe in that 170 mile an hour sustained to low 900 millibars range as well. Then, of course, the moisture and the sea surface temperatures have been great for Melissa, at least for developing pretty much the entire time. Our sea surface temperatures are close to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and then just a very moist environment is being siphoned from parts of the Pacific and South America alike. So yeah, that's kind of why Melissa is experiencing this rapid growth in strength, and also why it's somehow even kind of surpassing our expectations, which were already sky high for this storm. Now, moving a bit away from Melissa, here is going to be some of the weather that we're expecting in the US today. It looks like we just have a general thunderstorm threat in parts of the southeast, and then we have a general thunderstorm threat in parts of the northern and central plains as well. I think pretty much the only threat with both these areas are going to be for some strong straight line winds, maybe a couple of strong gusts. Not really expecting anything of severe proportions though. And this is just a sample of what it could look like as it unfolds in parts of the southeast today. It looks like all of our storms are going to pretty much last the entire day as they move from the west to east. Something to note is that we're going to have a little bit of a band of confluence kind of stretching all the way up towards our low pressure center. This is of course going to be caused by that trough, which has been the main weather causer of this system, moving from parts of Texas all the way to now Florida and Georgia on Monday. I think the main thing with this is just going to be some strong wind gust. A lot of our storm mode looks super messy and linear, so I don't really think these storms are going to have a super good chance of developing into anything super organized. Now, I also think there's going to be loads of rain here, so I think there's going to be a marginal threat for some flash flooding. Nothing super crazy though, as these storms are going to be moving somewhat quickly. But yeah, as these storms kind of crash into the western Florida coast, we could actually see something interesting. I think we're going to see lots of storms bubble up, as this is going to be around the early afternoon when this happens. And when this original line interacts with them, that could maybe strengthen them momentarily, creating a couple of areas where we could see some stronger winds. And these are just going to push across the state. The HRRR is also predicting a couple of storms rotating. I think that's because the shear in Cape and even moisture out here is pretty solid. It's just because our storm mode is so messy. That's really the main limiter for all of this. But yeah, I think the main thing for all of this is just going to be some strong straight line winds. Nothing really severe though. If there were going to be any areas where I think we could see some severe weather, I think that's going to be kind of on the Georgia coast and then also on the western coast of Florida, even stretching all the way up into parts of the Big Bend as well. But I think that's going to be pretty much it for our strongest areas and just general areas for thunderstorms in parts of the southeast. And last but not least, we're just going to take a very quick peek at what's going on in the northern plains. We're having a pretty big trough moving through. I think this is going to be the next big weather causer as it kind of swoops down to the south. I think it's going to eject and bring maybe even more severe weather this week. But as for today, I think along the front line of this, we're going to have a bit of a cold front moving through, bringing some cold Arctic air, kind of bringing in more of a fall feel, but it's also going to bring some strong storms with it. We could have a somewhat strong line develop on the front edge of this in parts of Nebraska and Kansas. I think this would just once again be for some strong winds. The main limiting factor with this is going to be that there's just not a whole lot of moisture and instability out here. This is just going to kind of be carried by some shear parameters. So maybe we could see a couple of organized storms, but mostly with that, just going to be a couple of isolated areas receiving some strong wind gusts. The likelihood of seeing something that's severe is not zero. It's just not going to be super likely with these either, kind of like in the southeast.